The last 11 questions went so well, so here are 5 more questions from S.J. Thomason that she thinks atheists can't answer, but that clearly we can. Not too long ago, I looked at 11 questions that a channel called Christian Apologist said atheists can't answer, and she was universally proven wrong when pretty much every atheist on YouTube answered them. So now she's back with another 5 questions that atheists will answer, but she won't acknowledge it. There seems to be something wrong with the moral and ethical senses of the absurdly religious when they can't admit reality. So let's go see what she wants to know and why. As is no surprise, she's going to be ridiculously wrong.
Hello, you've reached Christian-Apologist.com, and this is S.J. Thomason.
This is not an answering machine. Or who knows, maybe this is their voicemail message. Whatever, get on with your questions.
And today I'm going to follow up on questions that I've recently asked atheists with more questions. I have 5 additional questions.
You mean those questions that you claimed atheists can't answer, which clearly we all could. And this video is also entitled 5 More Questions Atheists Cannot Answer, which invariably we'll all be able to. Is she going to go back and change the titles, or is she going to continue to be dishonest? I guess time will only tell.
The first question is a little long, so hang on for a second and let me explain. Despite the culture or era, sane humans have the innate sense of what's right and what's wrong.
I will quibble with that because I don't think there's anything that's innately right or innately wrong. Right and wrong are human inventions. We decide either individually or as part of a societal collective what will be acceptable and what will not. There is absolutely no ethical standards that have been universally true across all cultures and throughout time. So while people generally try to do what's quote-unquote right within their own societal context, what's right for you isn't necessarily what's right for someone else somewhere else.
And we prefer to do what's right to help our fellow humans. No matter the major religion, we are all aware of the golden rule. We prefer the humble over the braggarts, the selfless over the selfish, and the truthful over the liars.
As I said in the last set of questions, that's not true. Every politician we elect is a braggart. If they weren't, they wouldn't get elected. Most celebrities are loudmouthed and self-important. And seriously, have you ever seen social media where everyone, it seems, thinks that the entire planet is interested in everything they do, everywhere they go, what they eat, and what they wear? This is an absolutely false statement to make.
Cross-cultural scholars, such as Gert Hofstede, Fons Trompenaars, Robert House, and Shalom Schwartz, have found that societies vary in ways inconsistent with our innate morality. For example, not all societies are considered collective or cooperative.
Name one that isn't.
Collective societies are in Asia, Northern Europe, the Arab region, Africa, and South America. Highly individualistic societies are in Western Europe, the United States, and Canada.
And that's false. Now, yes, those people respect more individual rights and individuality than some of the others that were mentioned, but that doesn't make them non-collective, because we all pass laws under which everyone is ideally held responsible. We have uniform expectations that everyone is supposed to be held to. Each person doesn't get to decide on their own and with no external consequences what they can do and what they can't. I don't think you know what collective means.
Many societies in the world are hedonistic, hierarchical, and have preferences against gender egalitarianism.
Mostly religious ones, because you will notice that the least egalitarian societies tend to be the most religious, and the most egalitarian societies tend to be the least religious. Religion screws up everything.
So, what we ought to do is often inconsistent with what we are doing.
That assumes that there is an ought in the first place, and this is really where Hume's is-ought problem comes in. David Hume, a Scottish philosopher, argued that far too many people try to get from what actually is, the real world that we live in, to what they think ought to be, a set of principles dictated by a religion, an ideology, or a philosophy, without having any means at all for filling in all the fiddly bits in the middle. And this is very, very true of religion, where the religious will say this is how things should be, without having any means of showing that's how the world ought to work. Because oughts are largely opinions, not demonstrable facts. So you're off in questionable territory there, SJ.
How do we know what we ought to do?
We decide that collectively. There are no rules in this regard, no matter how much you want there to be. And this is where I usually point out the complete intellectual laziness of not just the religious, but of lots of people who want all of the rules set out in black and white that must always be true and can never be questioned, because it's a lot easier than having to think about the things that you believe. Instead of having to intellectually consider and rationally justify your own positions, you just have to blindly believe. That appeals to a lot of people for reasons I really don't understand.
How do we know it's right to help the needy, feed the poor, and act in a cooperative way?
Right? You'd have to define that word. But why do we tend to do that? Because of enlightened self-interest. It's the core component of all morality, religious and otherwise. Atheists just tend to be more honest about it than the religiously delusional are. We want to be treated a certain way, therefore we treat others that way in the hopes that if the tables were turned, they'd reciprocate. So if we were hungry, we'd want others to help feed us, thus we help feed those who are hungry. We can see ourselves in the plights of others. Welcome to morality in the real world.
Evolutionary biologists have made observations to show that cooperative societies were better poised for survival, and over thousands of years in the distant past, groups have fared better than individuals. Yet even in historical times, we have examples of highly individualist and highly successful societies, such as those in ancient Greece and Rome.
Those were more individualist, not completely individualist. A completely individualist society would be anarchy. Those people still cooperate to produce food, to produce goods, to build roads, to care for the needy, yada, yada, yada. And here's where I think it's clear that SJ doesn't really understand what she's talking about. She's just talking points, probably from some religious website, without having the slightest idea what's actually going on. And I wish I could say that I was surprised, but I can't.
Cooperative societies over the past couple of thousand years have not necessarily been better positioned for survival, because it has been shown that individualism is more beneficial in some ways. For example, a multitude of global studies have correlated gross domestic product with individualism. Individualism also corresponds with capitalism, innovation, and entrepreneurship. So why do even individualists know that we ought to help the weak, feed the poor, and be honest, just, empathetic, and loving?
Because they all live in societies with and depend on other people just like everyone else. Because they are, no matter how successful, still human and still programmed by evolution to be empathetic towards those in need, again for enlightened self-interest reasons. And let's be honest, society rewards those who make an open show of charity, both by giving them tax write-offs and through positive social advertising. They benefit by benefiting others.
Why is it that all societies, regardless of their practices, know what we ought to do?
Clearly, they don't. Take Nazi Germany or Communist Russia, for instance. Did they know what we ought to do? Take the Aztecs or Mayans. Did they know that they ought to be ripping the still-beating hearts out of the chests of their captives? Or should we all just be throwing gay people off roofs like they do in some heavily Muslim countries in the Middle East? It seems like you're being very selective here.
Where do we get this moral compass?
Enlightened self-interest. That's all we need.
2. What accounts for the empty tomb and the resurrection appearances of Jesus?
You'd have to show that any of that ever happened in reality, and not just in unsupported claims made in a book of mythology. And unfortunately for you, you can't do that. These are just claims, and claims are not reality until they are supported by independent, objectively verifiable evidence. So, we'll go back to one of my standard responses here, the Trojan War. Nobody took the Trojan War seriously until we discovered archaeological evidence that it actually happened. And even then, all of the tales of the machinations of gods and goddesses in Homer's epics, we don't believe those because they can't be verified to be true. So no matter how much you want to believe that Jesus rose from the dead, until you can prove it with more than a book, nobody has to take you seriously.
Roman pagans, Jews, and Christians in Jesus' time have all indicated that Jesus' empty tomb was found by second-class women.
Not true. Not even close. Even the accounts in the Bible have massive discrepancies, and we don't have a single demonstrable eyewitness account of Jesus anywhere. Josephus, Tacitus, Pliny the Younger, none of these people were contemporaneous with Jesus. They all operated from hearsay, or in the case of Josephus, outright Christian forgery. You have to remember that at that point in time, some of the greatest historians of the ancient world lived, and the overwhelming majority of them never even heard of Jesus. If these things convince you, you have no idea how to think critically.
In fact, Paul stated that 500 people witnessed Jesus over the next 40 days after he rose from the dead.
Good for Paul. I can state that 5 million people saw me flap my arms and fly around the city yesterday. That doesn't make it true. We have no information on who those 500 were, what they saw, or even if they existed in the first place. We do not have independent confirmation from even one of those supposed 500. And this is where religious bias comes into the picture. The bald assumption that the Bible has to be true because they want the Bible to be true. Just because you want it to be true doesn't make it so. It's only true and trustworthy insofar as you can verify it. And I'm sorry, but you just can't.
Many biblical and extra-biblical sources have indicated that early Christians preached illegally for the first few hundred years in support of Jesus. They preached for decades, braving beatings, stoning, crucifixion, beheadings, and some were burned to death.
Yep, still doesn't make what they were preaching true. You can point to all kinds of religious traditions where adherents underwent torture and death to preach the things that they believed. It doesn't mean that what they believed was actually true. You got Buddhist monks lighting themselves on fire. I'm sure that wouldn't prove to SJ that Buddhism was true.
3. If an atheist position is that the universe is the product of chance and necessity instead of the product of intelligence, how can he or she explain the fact that the universe is structured rationally, logically, and with mathematical precision and predictability?
First off, this just proves the ignorance of the religious. The universe has nothing at all to do with chance. It operates and came about based on the physical laws of the universe and predictable and understandable means that are the antithesis of random chance. If you can't even get that right, give up. Read a science book. Start with something grade school level. But here's the thing. We made up most of those things. We invented mathematics as a language to describe the universe. And the religious don't understand that. They seem to be amazed that language can describe things when that's why language exists in the first place. It's why it was made up to begin with, so that we could communicate with each other in an understandable, rational, and concise manner. So this is a dumb question based on religious ignorance.
Pope Benedict XVI said, if nature is really structured with a mathematical language, and mathematics invented by man can manage to understand it, this demonstrates something extraordinary. The objective structure of the universe and the intellectual structure of the human being coincide.
That's a complete misunderstanding of reality. It assumes, incorrectly, that there is something else going on that the religious cannot demonstrate. The universe is understandable. As we have learned more about it, we have developed a means to explain our understanding. And we can talk about the old tale of the blind man and the elephant, where each man is touching a different part of the elephant and describing their experiences to the others. But at the end of the day, they're still an elephant. The men are still sharing a real experience, and as they explore the elephant more, they will have to come up with new and different ways to explain their expanding experience to each other. That's what mathematics is with relation to the universe. We keep coming up with new forms of mathematics to explain the further into the cosmos we peer, the closer we can look at the very fabric of reality. And you know what we're not finding anywhere? God. Explain that one to us.
4. If atheists adhere to the belief that the purpose of human life is merely to procreate and survive, is it possible to determine that human life has any more value than animal life, since animals share the same basic purpose?
Who says it does? Now, of course, that relies on the misconception that atheists say anything at all about purpose. Purpose is something that we ourselves assign to our own life. There's no ultimate purpose. Now, as animals, and that's what we are, the species exists to procreate and evolve. If we didn't, we'd cease to exist, and that would be it for us. But so long as we're here, that doesn't mean that we can't assign other purposes, other reasons for us to go through our day-to-day lives while we're not procreating. You just want these things handed down from on high. And it doesn't work that way.
5. Why have so many atheists determined that the life of a fetus in the mother's womb is less valuable than the life of his or her mother?
That really has nothing to do with atheism, because there are plenty of pro-life atheists and plenty of pro-choice theists. But that said, I can only give my answer not based on atheism at all, but on rational reasoning. An adult female is an existing life with an existing personality, wishes, dreams, a job, a partner, and a direct impact on the planet. A fetus doesn't have that. It might in the future, but at the moment, not so much. So, given the choice between the two, I picked the one that has the impact now over the one that might potentially have it in the future. And since one relies bodily on the other, the one who is having their health and well-being demanded upon by a parasitic life form, she gets to decide if she consents to that demand. And if she doesn't, for whatever reason she chooses, then she gets to terminate that relationship. Now, once we find a way technologically to incubate a fetus without the woman being involved, that will make different moral decisions necessary. But so long as it's her body, it's her decision.
What standard do they use to value human life?
Whatever standard they choose, because human life is not valuable, full stop. And I know lots of people wish that it was, but it simply isn't universally held to a single standard of value that everyone just magically has no matter what. I value some people far more than others, and so do you. I value my mother more than I'd value Adolf Hitler. Hell, I'd value a dog more than I value the whole of the 9/11 Suicide Squad. People actually need to earn value. It isn't just granted. Again, this is just intellectual laziness, people who just want a rule they can follow, instead of having to think about it.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate the fact you stopped by. If you'd like to read more from what I've written or see more videos, you can stay on this channel. Please subscribe. If you'd like to read some of my blogs, please go to christian-apologist.com. Goodbye.
Yeah, I've been there, and honestly, I'm not impressed. But you know what might impress me a little? If she changed the titles on her videos to reflect that not only can atheists answer all of these questions, but they have. Of course, she won't, because she, like all the other apologists on YouTube who are making this very wrong claim, they're not interested in the truth. It's just a clickbaity title, and whether or not it actually reflects reality doesn't matter. And that's why people keep making video responses and pointing out how ridiculous the religious are. Because we care more about the truth than the religious do. And no matter how often they're corrected, the religious never change their minds if they can engage with others with different viewpoints at all. It's all about the feels and intellectual laziness and clinging to emotional comfort to the detriment of being rational for them. Nothing else seems to matter, which, while it certainly is sad, it's also baffling to those of us who actually care about the state of objective reality. We care if what we believe is true. The religious do not. What the hell is wrong with these people?